The restaurant was filled with a soft glow from crystal chandeliers, each one throwing small, delicate patterns across the polished floor. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with the scent of roasted meats and baked bread, creating a rich and comforting atmosphere. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, their steps quiet but efficient, carrying trays stacked with food and glasses of sparkling water. In one corner, a piano stood near a window, its black surface shining under the gentle light, untouched for most of the evening. The waitress moved quickly between the tables, her hands steady as she placed plates of food with care. She had worked here for a few years, and everyone knew her as polite, dependable, and quiet. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her uniform, while simple, was always clean and pressed. People often overlooked her because she didn't demand attention, but she had a presence that was calm and reassuring. At one of the tables near the piano sat a man whose presence seemed to fill the room even before he spoke. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that gleamed under the chandelier light, and wore a confident, almost arrogant expression. His eyes scanned the room as if he were examining every detail, noting who belonged and who did not. He had a reputation in the city as someone who had wealth, influence, and a sharp tongue. He often came here to enjoy the finer things in life and to remind people around him that he was the one who mattered. The waitress approached his table with a gentle smile. She placed a glass of water in front of him and asked if he would like anything else. He barely looked at her and gave a slight smirk. "You, yes, you," he said, pointing with one hand, his other hand tapping impatiently on the table. The room seemed to hush slightly, sensing a show about to unfold. He waved his hand toward the piano. "Can you play that thing?" he asked in a tone that carried more amusement than curiosity. The waitress paused for a moment, slightly surprised. She had played the piano before, though she rarely did so in public. It had always been her private joy, something that let her escape from the world for a little while. She shook her head politely. "No, sir, I don't play for guests," she said softly, trying to maintain a professional tone. The man leaned back in his chair, a smirk spreading across his face. He clearly enjoyed the moment. "Come on," he said, his voice carrying to the tables nearby. "I dare you. Everyone here will watch. Play a note, just one. Let's see if you're as talented as you think you are." The room suddenly became alive with whispers. People at nearby tables turned, curious about what was happening. The pianist challenge had begun without a single key being touched. The waitress felt a flutter in her stomach. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline. She looked at the piano, its black and white keys gleaming under the light. She had always loved the way it felt to sit at the instrument, how the notes could change the mood in a room. But now, with all eyes on her, she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. She knew this was no ordinary moment. It was an opportunity to show something of herself she had always kept hidden. The man watched her, leaning forward, his eyes sharp and expectant. He was sure she would refuse, or worse, embarrass herself. He tapped his fingers on the table, a slow, deliberate rhythm, as if mocking the music that might come from her hands. Taking a deep breath, the waitress stepped closer to the piano. Her uniform swished softly with each movement. Guests leaned slightly in their seats, some holding their forks midair, drawn by the tension building in the room. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingertips. Her heart beat steadily, not with panic but with focus. She had played countless times before, but never with an audience of strangers, and never under such intense scrutiny. The wealthy man chuckled, clearly enjoying the suspense. He whispered to a companion at his table, "She won't do it, watch." But the waitress remained silent, her eyes fixed on the keys. Her mind raced through the melodies she knew by heart. She thought of the songs she had practiced in her tiny apartment, alone without anyone listening. This moment felt strange yet familiar, as if all those hours of practice had been leading to now. Slowly, she pressed one key. The note rang out soft and pure, cutting through the murmurs of the restaurant. There was an immediate stillness. Guests froze, some eyes widening, others holding their breath. The sound of that single note seemed to fill the room in a way that nothing else had. The wealthy man's confident smirk faltered. He leaned slightly forward, surprised by the clarity and strength of the note. He had expected hesitation, maybe even a wrong key, but not this. The piano responded to her touch as if it recognized the skill behind it. The waitress's hand hovered over the keys for a moment longer, then lifted, letting the note linger. It seemed almost as if time had slowed, allowing everyone in the room to truly hear the purity and precision of the sound. Whispers broke out, softer this time, filled with astonishment. A few guests exchanged glances, nodding subtly, acknowledging that something remarkable was happening. The waitress's face remained calm, almost serene, as if she were only partially aware of the impact she had created. She took a small step back from the piano, her heart still racing, yet a quiet confidence settled within her. The wealthy man opened his mouth, possibly to speak, but no words came. His eyes were fixed on her, a mix of disbelief and curiosity forming on his face. He had been challenged countless times in his life, and he rarely found someone who could genuinely impress him on the first attempt. And here she was, a simple waitress standing before him, commanding attention with a single note. The room slowly began to return to normal, yet the energy had shifted. Guests were now watching her with interest rather than amusement. Some leaned closer to hear the note again. Others smiled quietly, sharing a moment of collective wonder. The waitress knew this was only the beginning, but for now she let the silence speak. She had taken the first step, and it had already changed how people saw her. As she stepped away from the piano, the wealthy man finally broke the silence. "Interesting," he said, his voice measured, almost reluctant. There was no smirk now, only a flicker of respect, though he tried to hide it. He had been proven wrong in a way he had not anticipated. The waitress returned to her duties, placing a tray of desserts on a nearby table, her movements as composed as ever. But inside she felt a spark of pride. She had dared to play, and the world had noticed, if only for a single note. The night continued around her, yet the memory of that note lingered both in her mind and in the minds of those who had heard it. It was a quiet triumph, the kind that does not demand recognition but leaves an undeniable mark. The wealthy man watched her from across the room, still unsure what had just happened. He had intended to challenge, to mock, perhaps even to belittle. Instead, he had witnessed something genuine and extraordinary. The room had shifted subtly, the atmosphere tinged with respect, curiosity, and a hint of awe. And for the waitress, the evening had opened a door she had never expected, a door that promised a story far greater than she could have imagined. After the first note lingered in the air, the restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Conversations had slowed, and the gentle clinking of cutlery felt distant compared to the impact of that single sound. The guests looked at one another, some with raised eyebrows, some with surprised smiles. Even the wealthy man who had dared the challenge could not hide the slight shock on his face. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, and tried to regain the confident composure he was known for. Yet deep down he was intrigued. The waitress stood quietly by a nearby table, her hands folding lightly in front of her. Though her heart still raced, she had managed to stay composed. She could feel the curious eyes of the restaurant on her, yet instead of fear, a quiet thrill ran through her. For years she had hidden her love for music, playing only in her small apartment or during stolen moments when nobody could hear. Now, in a room full of strangers, that private world seemed to open itself to everyone. Some of the guests leaned toward one another, whispering softly. "Did you hear that?" one asked, his voice barely audible. "She's just a waitress. How can someone play like that?" Others nodded, unable to take their eyes off her. There was an undeniable tension, an energy that had shifted the atmosphere from casual dinner to something extraordinary. The piano, once simply a piece of furniture, now held a weight of expectation. The wealthy man's eyes followed her every move. He could not deny that she had talent, but he had always believed he could control situations like this, always had the upper hand. He tapped his fingers against the table again, this time less playfully, a little more impatiently. "Play more," he finally said, his voice carrying over the low hum of murmured conversations. "Just one song. Show us what you can really do." The waitress hesitated. She looked at him, then around the room at the gathered faces. She knew this was a pivotal moment. She could refuse, as she had many times before, keeping her skill private and safe. Or she could embrace the challenge, letting her music tell the story her words never could. The glimmer of courage in her eyes became the deciding factor. Slowly, she stepped toward the piano, feeling the polished floor beneath her shoes. Guests shifted in their seats, some leaning closer, trying to see every detail of what was about to happen. The man at the table straightened, clearly anticipating a spectacle, confident she would stumble. He did not know that what she was about to do would change the perception of everyone present, including himself. Her hands hovered over the keys once more. Recalling the songs she had practiced countless times in the quiet of her home, she began with a simple melody, soft and unassuming, but each note resonated through the room in perfect clarity. The first few chords were gentle, almost shy, yet they carried an emotional weight that the listeners could feel. The guests leaned in, as if drawn by an invisible thread, their curiosity slowly turning into admiration. The waitress's fingers moved with a rhythm that seemed natural, her body swaying slightly with the music, fully immersed in the moment. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a storyteller, using her piano to speak the language of the heart. The wealthy man's expression shifted from confidence to surprise, then to a kind of reluctant respect. He had not expected this. He had expected hesitation, mistakes, maybe even embarrassment. Instead, he was witnessing someone completely in control, someone who had transformed what was meant to be a trivial dare into something remarkable. For the first time that evening, he found himself unsure of how to react. Around the room, whispers grew quieter, replaced by attentive silence. The music seemed to weave itself into the very air of the restaurant, creating a gentle spell that held everyone captivated. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the sound carry them. Others watched her fingers dance over the keys, amazed by the skill and passion she displayed. Even the kitchen staff paused briefly, hearing the melody drift through the doors and into the bustling back of the restaurant. The waitress felt a sense of liberation with every note she played. The nervousness that had fluttered in her stomach earlier had transformed into focused energy. Each chord became a statement, each pause a breath of expression. She was not performing to please anyone, not even the wealthy man who had dared her. She was playing because it was a part of her, something she had carried silently for years, and now it was alive in front of all these people. The wealthy man shifted slightly in his seat, his eyes never leaving her. His previous amusement was gone, replaced by a genuine curiosity he had not felt in a long time. He leaned forward slightly as if trying to understand the depth of the music. For someone used to commanding attention and respect, this experience was unfamiliar. It was not about power or wealth. It was about skill, presence, and authenticity. Guests who had been skeptical at first now watched with amazement. The initial dare had seemed like a trivial moment, something to mock or challenge, but it had become something entirely different. The room had been transformed by her music. Even the staff who had known her casually were beginning to see a different side of her. A side that was confident, talented, and quietly commanding. The melody continued, growing slightly more complex yet still soft and controlled. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. It was not flashy or showy. It was deliberate, precise, and filled with feeling. The wealthy man could no longer look away. He felt a mix of disbelief and admiration, realizing that this simple waitress had a depth and talent he had never anticipated. As she played, she began to notice small reactions from the audience. A woman at a nearby table brushed a tear from her eye, overcome by the beauty of the music. A child listened intently, wide-eyed, sensing something magical. Even the man who had dared her challenge seemed to soften, his earlier arrogance melting into a quiet acknowledgement of her skill. The room was no longer a restaurant. It was a concert hall, and she was the musician commanding the stage with nothing but her presence and talent. She paused briefly, allowing a single note to linger, and the silence that followed was profound. The audience seemed to hold their collective breath, caught between the final note and the world around them. Then slowly, they exhaled, a wave of appreciation passing through the room. Some whispered praise, others simply smiled in quiet wonder. The waitress felt a small private thrill at the effect she had created, though she did not let it show too openly. She had played for herself, and the audience's reaction was a gift she accepted gracefully. The wealthy man finally spoke, breaking the spell. "Well," he said, his voice calmer than before, almost reluctant. "I did not expect that." His eyes, once sharp and challenging, now held a flicker of respect. It was not admiration for wealth or power, but admiration for talent and courage. He leaned back in his chair, allowing the realization to sink in that he had underestimated someone he thought he could easily challenge. The waitress stepped back from the piano, her hands resting lightly at her sides. The room had returned to its usual hum, yet the energy had shifted. Guests were more attentive, conversations filled with awe and curiosity rather than casual chatter. The simple act of one person stepping up to play the piano had changed the atmosphere completely. She returned to her duties, placing water and menus on tables with the same grace she always had, but now carrying a quiet confidence. She knew she had revealed something important, not for fame, but as a statement of who she was beneath the uniform and the quiet demeanor. The wealthy man watched her from across the room, still processing the evening. He had thought this would be a trivial moment, a way to amuse himself at someone else's expense. Instead, it had become a lesson in humility, an unexpected encounter with genuine talent and courage. He realized that true skill and authenticity could appear in the most unassuming places, and it often came when least expected. For the waitress, the night continued as usual, yet she felt changed. The thrill of stepping into the piano's embrace, of expressing herself fully for the first time in public, lingered. She had faced the challenge not for recognition or reward, but because she had wanted to, and now the room had witnessed something rare and true. The whispers of admiration continued quietly, and the sense of respect in the air lingered. This was only the beginning, and she knew that what had started as a simple dare would ripple through the lives of those who had watched, leaving a mark that would not easily fade. The room was silent, but not in a tense way. It was a calm, almost reverent silence. The guests had stopped their conversations, and even the waiters paused briefly in their work, curious to see what would happen next. The piano still sat there, black and glossy, as if waiting for the next moment of magic. The waitress stood nearby, her heart steady now, no longer filled with the nervous flutters that had accompanied her first note. She had discovered a rhythm within herself, a flow of confidence she had not expected. Her eyes moved over the piano keys, remembering the countless hours she had spent practicing at home. Each note held memories of her private life, small victories and quiet joys she had kept to herself. She allowed her fingers to hover above the keys for a moment, feeling the weight of the piano beneath her touch. Then slowly she began to play again. This time it was not a single note, but a simple melody that rolled softly into the air, gentle yet full of feeling. The first chords resonated through the room, soft and delicate. The wealthy man who had challenged her leaned forward slightly, his expression a mixture of surprise and fascination. He had seen many things in his life, had challenged people for sport, had made bets and dares countless times, but nothing like this had ever happened before. He could not predict what would come next. As she played, the room seemed to change. The lighting, the colors, even the air felt different, shaped by the music. Guests leaned forward, their eyes fixed on her hands moving across the keys. Some murmured softly to one another, unable to contain their amazement. The melody was simple, yet each note carried emotion. It was not just sound. It was a story unfolding in real time. The waitress's hands moved gracefully, each finger pressing the keys with purpose. She allowed herself to be fully present in the music, not thinking about the audience, not thinking about the wealthy man's dare. She only thought of the piano, of the flow of notes that had become her language. The melody grew slightly, introducing subtle variations, a rise and fall that felt like the gentle rhythm of breathing. The wealthy man's confident posture had softened. His usual smirk had vanished, replaced by a thoughtful expression. He could no longer look at her as just a waitress. There was a depth he had not anticipated. He leaned back slightly, observing not with judgment, but with a curiosity that was new to him. He had expected a performance that would falter, a note that might go wrong, but she had surpassed all his expectations. Guests whispered among themselves, careful not to disturb the music. The melody had a way of touching everyone differently. Some felt a pang of nostalgia, others a sense of peace, and some simply marveled at the technical skill. The simplicity of the song made it accessible, but the subtle nuances revealed a mastery beyond the ordinary. Each chord seemed to have a voice, each pause a breath of life. The waitress's eyes were calm, her expression serene. She played not to impress, not to prove anything, but because she loved the music. Her fingers moved with fluidity, and she felt a sense of freedom that she had never experienced in public before. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was an extension of her emotions, a way to share her inner world without words. The wealthy man watched her closely. He had been quick to challenge her, to assume superiority. But now he found himself in a state of silent admiration. He realized that talent could not be judged by appearances, that humility and grace could exist in unexpected forms. He had underestimated her, and the lesson was both humbling and enlightening. As the melody continued, some guests began to close their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others watched her hands, fascinated by the skill and control she displayed. The music was not flashy or ostentatious. It was thoughtful, precise, and heartfelt. It drew attention not by spectacle, but by the quiet strength of its execution. The waitress felt the energy of the room, not as pressure, but as connection. She could sense the guests' appreciation, the way the music seemed to touch something deep within them. Her mind was calm, focused entirely on the melody and the flow of notes. Each chord, each pause, each subtle change was intentional, a reflection of her understanding of the instrument and the emotions it could convey. The wealthy man's hands were still, his expression unreadable at first. Then a subtle nod escaped him, barely noticeable but enough to reveal his respect. He had witnessed many performances in his life, yet few had affected him in this way. The simplicity and honesty of her music carried a weight that power and money could never replicate. The melody began to evolve, introducing a gentle variation that added depth to the story she was telling. It was not complex or overwhelming, but the slight changes caught the attention of the listeners, drawing them further into the experience. The music seemed to breathe, to rise and fall naturally as if it were alive. The audience was completely absorbed now. Even those who had arrived late and had not witnessed the initial dare were caught in the spell of the music. Guests who had been skeptical or indifferent found themselves leaning closer, drawn by the emotion and skill displayed before them. The atmosphere was filled with a quiet reverence, a shared recognition of something extraordinary. The wealthy man's eyes softened, a small smile forming on his lips. He realized that this was not just a performance. It was a revelation. He had thought the evening would be a game, a challenge to assert dominance, but instead it had become a lesson in humility and recognition. The waitress, in her calm and unassuming way, had reminded everyone present that talent and authenticity could appear anywhere, often in the most unexpected people. The music continued, weaving a delicate tapestry of sound that filled the room. Guests were moved, some whispering softly, others simply watching in awe. The melody was unhurried, allowing each note to resonate fully, giving time for the emotions to settle in the listeners' hearts. The waitress's hands moved confidently, guided by intuition and years of private practice. She was completely absorbed, not thinking about the audience or the wealthy man, only the piano and the music it produced. As the final notes approached, she allowed them to linger, a soft echo that filled the space and invited reflection. The silence that followed was profound. No one moved immediately, reluctant to break the spell the music had cast. It was a moment of shared understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the beauty they had just experienced. The wealthy man finally broke the silence with a quiet, measured word, "Remarkable." It was not a loud or boastful compliment, but the weight of it carried respect and admiration. He had been challenged in a way he had not anticipated, and the experience had left an impression on him that was both humbling and enlightening. The guests began to murmur, sharing their astonishment and admiration quietly. Some nodded to one another, acknowledging the skill and courage it took to play so confidently under scrutiny. The waitress stepped away from the piano, her posture calm and composed, yet a sense of quiet triumph radiated from her. She had faced the dare, embraced it, and revealed a talent that left the entire room captivated. Even as she returned to her duties, carrying trays and refilling glasses, the energy in the room remained changed. Conversations resumed, but there was an undercurrent of respect and wonder. The wealthy man continued to observe her, now with genuine curiosity and perhaps a hint of reflection. He had intended to assert dominance, to test her, but instead he had witnessed authenticity, skill, and courage. The waitress felt a quiet satisfaction within herself. She had shared a piece of her world, her music without fear or hesitation. The impact was evident, not in applause or praise, but in the subtle shift in energy around her. She had shown that talent and passion could shine through even in the most ordinary appearances, and that recognition could come from the most unexpected places. The night continued, but the memory of the music lingered in the minds of everyone who had heard it. The first simple note had grown into a melody that touched hearts and inspired awe. For the waitress, it was a moment of personal triumph and expression, a quiet but profound victory that she would carry with her forever. The room seemed to breathe with the music now. Every guest drawn into the gentle flow of melody the waitress created. Her fingers moved with precision, each note clear and purposeful. She had found a rhythm that felt natural, almost as if the piano itself was guiding her, amplifying the emotions she had long held inside. Guests leaned forward, drawn into the quiet story that unfolded with each chord, some closing their eyes to feel the music rather than hear it. The wealthy man, sitting at his table, was unable to look away. His previous sense of control had vanished, replaced by a curiosity that he could not suppress. He had expected amusement, a chance to assert dominance, but instead he found himself witnessing genuine talent and heartfelt expression. His gaze softened slightly, a subtle acknowledgement that he had underestimated her. It was a humbling moment for a man so accustomed to authority, one that forced him to reconsider assumptions he had long held. The melody grew, introducing subtle layers that added depth without becoming overwhelming. The waitress's hands moved confidently across the keys, blending soft arpeggios with delicate chords, creating a rich tapestry of sound. Each note seemed to carry a story, one of quiet strength, hidden talent, and determination. She was no longer simply performing. She was communicating something deeper, something that words could never capture. Around the room, guests felt the effect of her music. A man at a nearby table, who had appeared distracted and uninterested moments earlier, now leaned forward, eyes fixed on her hands. He whispered softly to his companion, "She's incredible," as if sharing a secret with the world. Across the room, a woman smiled quietly, tears forming in her eyes, touched by the emotion that the melody evoked. Even the staff, moving between tables, paused for just a moment to appreciate the performance. The waitress's movements were calm and controlled, yet there was a fluidity to her playing that made it seem effortless. She had long practiced these techniques in private, and now, in front of an audience, they came naturally, almost instinctively. Each note was intentional, each pause carefully measured, yet it all felt organic, flowing as if the music had a life of its own. The wealthy man watched closely, his hands folded in front of him. He had expected a performance that would falter, perhaps a mistake that would allow him to regain control. Instead, he found himself mesmerized. He realized that talent could not be forced, and that true artistry often came from a place of passion, dedication, and authenticity. His usual arrogance softened as he silently acknowledged her skill. Guests around the room were captivated, their initial curiosity now transformed into admiration. Some whispered quietly, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of sound that filled the air. Others simply listened in awe, absorbing the performance without distraction. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge between the performer and the audience, connecting them through something profound and shared. The waitress felt a sense of liberation as she continued to play. The initial tension she had felt at the dare had vanished, replaced by a flowing confidence. She was immersed in the music, fully present in the moment, aware only of the story she was telling through her fingers. The melody was her voice, conveying emotions that words could never fully express. The wealthy man's expression shifted subtly as he observed her. He had often believed that wealth, power, and control could define a person's influence. Yet here he was, captivated not by his own authority, but by someone who had revealed her talent through dedication and heart. He leaned slightly forward, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. It was a moment of realization, an understanding that true respect could not be bought or demanded. It had to be earned through authenticity and skill. The melody continued to evolve, becoming richer and more complex. The waitress introduced gentle variations, weaving minor and major chords together to create emotional depth. Each change was subtle, but it resonated with the listeners, drawing them further into the story. The music seemed to breathe, rising and falling naturally, reflecting the nuances of human emotion. Guests who had initially doubted her ability now found themselves completely absorbed. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling emotions stir that they could not name. Others watched her hands, fascinated by the technical skill and precision she displayed. The room was united in silent admiration, all attention focused on the piano and the story it told. The wealthy man remained still, taking in every detail. He had thought the evening would be a game, a chance to amuse himself at the expense of another. Instead, he found himself in the rare position of being a witness to something genuinely extraordinary. His previous assumptions had been shattered, and in their place was a quiet respect for the waitress's courage, talent, and composure. The waitress's hands moved with confidence, each note flowing seamlessly into the next. She was completely absorbed, feeling the music as if it were an extension of herself. The melody rose and fell, carrying subtle emotions that resonated with everyone in the room. The performance was neither rushed nor showy. It was thoughtful, deliberate, and full of life. Around the room, the audience responded in small, subtle ways. A child's eyes widened in wonder. A couple held hands tightly, and an elderly guest smiled softly, reminiscing about memories the music evoked. The piano's voice spoke to each person differently, yet the effect was universal, a quiet awe that filled the space. The wealthy man shifted slightly in his seat, a sense of introspection settling over him. He had challenged the waitress, expecting to demonstrate his superiority, but the situation had reversed. He realized that talent, grace, and authenticity could emerge from the most unexpected places. The experience reminded him that true influence came not from wealth or status, but from skill, dedication, and genuine expression. The melody reached a gentle climax, the notes lingering in the air, leaving space for reflection and appreciation. The audience was enraptured, fully immersed in the experience. The waitress's hands moved with precision and feeling, each note a reflection of her inner world, her thoughts and emotions. She had transformed the room with her music, creating a shared moment that was both intimate and powerful. As the final chords faded, a soft silence enveloped the room. Guests were slow to break it, reluctant to disturb the spell the music had cast. The wealthy man exhaled quietly, a small, respectful nod acknowledging the skill he had witnessed. He had come expecting entertainment at another's expense, but he had been given something far more valuable, a reminder of the power of authenticity and the beauty of hidden talent. The waitress stepped back from the piano, her posture calm and composed. She had played not for recognition or praise, but for the joy of expressing herself and sharing a piece of her world. Yet the effect was undeniable. The room was changed, filled with admiration, respect, and a quiet sense of wonder. She returned to her duties with the same grace she had always displayed, carrying a newfound confidence in her quiet triumph. The wealthy man observed her, a mixture of reflection and intrigue in his expression. He had challenged her, yet it had become a moment of humility and insight. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, transforming a simple dare into an unforgettable lesson in talent, courage, and human connection. The piano had spoken and the room had listened, united in a moment that would linger long after the notes faded. For the waitress, the experience was deeply personal. She had stepped into the light, embraced her skill, and shared it with the world. The music had flowed from her fingers, touching hearts and minds, creating a connection that transcended words. She felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, knowing she had revealed a part of herself that would not be forgotten. The night continued around her, but the atmosphere had shifted. Guests carried the memory of the music with them, sharing glances and whispers of admiration. The wealthy man remained thoughtful, his perspective altered by the unexpected demonstration of talent and courage. The waitress had taken a simple dare and turned it into an unforgettable moment, leaving an impression that would resonate in the minds and hearts of everyone present. The music continued to flow from the piano, filling the restaurant with a quiet, powerful energy. Each note carried a weight, a meaning that seemed to touch everyone differently. The waitress's hands moved with practiced ease, fingers gliding across the keys, coaxing melodies that felt both intimate and expansive. She played with a confidence that came not from seeking approval, but from the joy of expressing herself, a feeling she had long kept hidden from the world. The wealthy man at his table had long since stopped thinking about the dare or the outcome. He watched her with an intensity he had not expected, seeing her in a new light. The arrogance that had once defined him seemed to fade, replaced by curiosity and admiration. He realized that the power he often wielded in social situations meant little compared to the quiet strength of talent and authenticity. For a moment he simply listened, absorbing the depth and emotion that the music conveyed. Guests in the restaurant were captivated. Some closed their eyes, allowing the music to take them on a journey, while others watched in fascination, observing her hands and the way she seemed to channel her soul through the piano. The melody rose and fell, gentle yet commanding, each chord carefully placed to draw out emotion and connection. The room was no longer just a restaurant. It had become a shared space of wonder and reflection. The waitress felt a calm focus, her mind attuned to the music and the story she was telling. The audience's reactions were subtle but palpable. She could sense the attention and curiosity, but it did not distract her. Instead, it fueled her concentration and expression. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, creating a rhythm that resonated with the listeners. She was no longer playing for herself alone. She was sharing a piece of her world with everyone present, bridging the gap between her private passion and the public moment. The wealthy man shifted in his seat, leaning slightly forward. He had believed he could command respect through wealth, charm, or intimidation, but now he realized that true respect came from skill, dedication, and the courage to share it. The performance had humbled him, in a way that was unfamiliar yet enlightening. He observed the subtle changes in the melody, the nuances in her expression, and the way the music seemed to ripple through the room. It was a lesson in quiet power, and he felt a mixture of astonishment and admiration. The melody continued to build, introducing gentle variations that added depth without overwhelming the senses. Each chord seemed to carry a message, a layer of emotion that touched the guests in different ways. Some felt a sense of nostalgia, recalling memories from their own lives. Others were moved by the beauty of the skill on display, recognizing the dedication that must have gone into mastering such a talent. The music connected everyone, forming an unspoken bond that transcended social boundaries. The waitress's hands moved with precision and grace, her movements almost poetic. She had long practiced these melodies in private, yet now, with a room full of spectators, the music felt alive, dynamic, and responsive. She allowed herself to become fully immersed, feeling each note and its resonance, letting the piano convey what words could never express. The story she told through her fingers was powerful, subtle, and deeply human. The wealthy man observed her closely. He had come with the intention of asserting dominance, of turning the situation into entertainment at someone else's expense. Instead, he found himself witnessing a moment of authenticity that left him reflecting on his own assumptions and behavior. He could not deny her talent, nor could he ignore the courage it took to play with such composure in front of strangers. The experience had unsettled him, in a way that was quietly transformative. Guests leaned forward in their seats, completely absorbed in the performance. The music flowed seamlessly with a rhythm that felt natural and effortless. The melody evoked a spectrum of emotions, from serenity to nostalgia, from quiet contemplation to subtle exhilaration. The waitress's fingers danced across the keys, her touch delicate yet confident, her focus unwavering. The piano had become an extension of herself, a tool for expression that allowed her to communicate beyond words. The wealthy man's posture had relaxed, his earlier rigidity softened by the beauty and skill of her performance. He realized that he had underestimated the power of someone who possessed both talent and humility. The dare he had issued now seemed insignificant compared to the impact of what he had just witnessed. He observed the subtle shifts in the melody, the careful choices she made in phrasing and timing, and the way the music seemed to hold the attention of every listener. The melody reached a gentle peak, not in volume or speed, but in emotional intensity. Each note lingered in the air, echoing softly in the minds of the listeners. Guests felt the music resonate within them, creating a shared moment of appreciation and reflection. Some whispered softly to each other, commenting on the skill and beauty of the performance. Others remained silent, lost in the experience, allowing the music to guide their emotions. The waitress felt a sense of fulfillment, a quiet pride in the connection she had forged with the audience. She had taken a challenge, a dare meant to provoke or amuse, and transformed it into something meaningful. The music had become a bridge between her private world and the lives of those around her, a testament to the power of talent, courage, and authenticity. The wealthy man finally spoke, his voice low and respectful. "Incredible," he said, a single word carrying weight and sincerity. It was not a casual compliment or an attempt to regain control. It was genuine recognition of her skill and bravery. The words seemed to echo in the room, affirming the impact of the performance. The melody continued for a few more minutes, each note deliberate, each pause meaningful. The audience remained captivated, fully engaged in the unfolding story. The waitress's hands moved with confidence, her fingers tracing the familiar paths she had practiced countless times. Yet each performance felt unique, shaped by the energy in the room and the emotions she felt in that moment. The music began to draw to a close, the final notes lingering in the air like a gentle sigh. Guests were slow to react, reluctant to break the spell that had been created. The wealthy man watched her with a mixture of admiration and contemplation. He had come expecting amusement, but he had been given something far more valuable, a reminder of the power of talent, humility, and authenticity. The waitress stepped back from the piano, her posture composed, her expression serene. She had played not for recognition, not for applause, but for the joy of sharing her passion and the fulfillment of expressing herself. Yet the effect was undeniable. The room had been transformed, filled with admiration, respect, and a sense of wonder. She returned to her duties, moving gracefully, carrying a quiet confidence that was evident to all who observed her. Guests whispered among themselves, exchanging glances of appreciation and surprise. The wealthy man remained thoughtful, reflecting on the lesson he had just witnessed. The dare, the moment of challenge, had become an opportunity for revelation, a demonstration of talent, courage, and the power of being true to oneself. The music had bridged gaps, connected hearts, and left an impression that would endure long after the notes had faded. For the waitress, the experience was deeply personal. She had faced the challenge, embraced it, and shared a part of herself that had long remained private. The music had allowed her to communicate in a way that words could not, creating a moment of connection and understanding with everyone in the room. The night continued, but the memory of the performance lingered, a quiet triumph that she would carry with her forever. The night had grown quieter now, but the energy from the piano performance lingered in the air like a gentle vibration that refused to fade. Guests were finishing their meals, some exchanging hushed words about what they had just experienced, and others sitting in thoughtful silence. The waitress moved from table to table, carrying trays, refilling glasses, and taking orders with the same calm, composed demeanor she had always displayed. Yet inside, a quiet excitement stirred. She had revealed a part of herself that few had ever known, and it had been met with genuine respect and admiration. The wealthy man remained at his table, observing her. He had spent the evening reflecting, not only on her performance but also on the assumptions he had brought into the restaurant. He had believed wealth and status gave him authority over moments like these, over people's attention and judgment. Yet here he was witnessing something far more powerful: authenticity, skill, and courage. He found himself quietly admiring her, not for the dare or the spectacle, but for the way she had shared a piece of her soul without hesitation. The piano sat quietly in its corner, the polished black surface reflecting the soft light of the chandeliers. It had been a bridge between worlds that night, between the private world of the waitress's talent and the public world of the audience. Each key she had touched carried her passion, her focus, and her story. And now, even in its silence, the piano seemed to hum with the echoes of the music that had filled the room. Guests began to leave, some pausing near the piano to exchange a quiet nod or a soft word of praise. A few approached her, complimenting her skill, expressing genuine surprise that someone who appeared so ordinary could possess such extraordinary talent. The waitress received each comment with her characteristic grace, a simple smile, a polite nod, never overplaying the moment but quietly acknowledging their admiration. The wealthy man finally stood. The first time all evening he had moved from his seat with purpose. He approached the piano slowly, his gaze fixed on her. His usual confident manner had softened, replaced by a quiet sincerity. He cleared his throat, hesitant but deliberate. "You have a gift," he said, his voice carrying a tone of respect he rarely expressed. "I misjudged you. I thought this was just a game, but it was far more. Thank you for sharing that." The waitress's heart beat a little faster, but she maintained her calm. She nodded politely, accepting his words with quiet dignity. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady and composed. She did not seek approval, but the acknowledgement felt sincere and meaningful. It was a rare moment of recognition that extended beyond social status, beyond wealth, to the core of her abilities and dedication. He paused for a moment, glancing at the piano, then back at her. "You play with such ease, yet there's strength in your music. It's remarkable how someone can convey so much emotion with such simplicity." She allowed herself a brief smile, appreciating that he had noticed the subtlety of her expression and control. It had not been about showiness or dramatic gestures. It had been about truth and authenticity, and he had seen that. As the restaurant began to empty, the staff quietly congratulated her. Some had known of her musical abilities but had never witnessed them firsthand. Others were seeing her for the first time in a light that had always been hidden, and the impact was undeniable. It was a moment of shared recognition and appreciation, and for the waitress, it felt like the culmination of years of private practice, patience, and quiet perseverance. The wealthy man returned to his table, but his demeanor had changed. There was no trace of the smirk or superiority that had marked his arrival. Instead, he seemed reflective, almost humbled by what he had witnessed. He had come to the restaurant to challenge and perhaps amuse himself, but he had left with something far more valuable, a lesson in humility, respect, and the unexpected power of talent and authenticity. The waitress cleaned a nearby table, her movements smooth and deliberate. She could feel the lingering energy of the performance in the room, a quiet hum of connection and shared experience. The guests who remained spoke softly, exchanging their thoughts about what they had seen and heard. The piano had spoken without words, and in its voice, everyone had found something meaningful. In the quiet moments after the restaurant's rush, she approached the piano and lightly touched a key just once. The note rang out softly, a gentle reminder of what had taken place. It was a personal acknowledgement, a quiet conversation between her and the instrument, a moment to savor the significance of the evening. The sound resonated, delicate yet profound, filling the empty space with memory and reflection. The wealthy man watched her again, this time with a softer curiosity. He had been captivated not just by the music, but by her composure, her authenticity, and the way she had owned the moment without arrogance or pretense. It was a reminder that true presence and skill could be more powerful than status, wealth, or control. He understood quietly that what he had witnessed was rare and valuable. The night drew to a close, and the last of the guests departed. The lights dimmed slightly, and the atmosphere returned to its usual calm, yet the memory of the music lingered. The waitress completed her final tasks, her body moving efficiently, yet her mind was reflective. She had faced a challenge, embraced it, and shared something deeply personal. The impact had been far greater than she could have anticipated, touching the audience in ways that extended beyond the simple act of playing. The piano stood in the corner, silent now, yet the echoes of her performance seemed to resonate within the room itself. It had been more than an instrument that night. It had been a conduit for emotion, a messenger of skill and courage. Through it, she had communicated a story, a piece of herself, and had left a lasting impression on all who had witnessed it. The wealthy man departed last, pausing at the door to glance back at her. He did not speak, but his eyes held a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition of what he had seen. It was a moment that required no words, for the message had already been conveyed through music and presence. The restaurant, once filled with the usual chatter and clinking of dishes, was now imbued with a subtle sense of reverence and wonder that would linger even after the last light was extinguished. The waitress closed the restaurant behind her, stepping outside into the cool night air. She inhaled deeply, letting the stillness wrap around her. The evening had been extraordinary, a test, a challenge, and ultimately a moment of triumph. She had revealed her talent in a world that rarely noticed quiet strength, and in doing so, she had changed not only the perception of those around her, but also her own understanding of courage and presence. As she walked home, she reflected on the night. The dare had started as a simple challenge, perhaps even an attempt to belittle or amuse, but it had transformed into an opportunity for expression, connection, and respect. It had reminded her that true talent does not seek approval, yet when shared with authenticity, it has the power to move, inspire, and leave a lasting mark. The night was quiet, the city streets empty in the soft glow of streetlights. She thought of the faces she had seen, the subtle nods, the whispered admiration, and even the wealthy man's quiet respect. These were the moments that mattered, the recognition of effort, skill, and authenticity that no money or status could ever replace. It was a lesson that she carried with her. a reminder of the power of being true to oneself. Finally, she reached her apartment, closing the door behind her. The evening's events replayed in her mind, note by note, expression by expression. She smiled softly, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. The piano, the music, and the courage to play had created a memory that would linger, a testament to talent, resilience, and the unexpected ways in which our abilities can touch others. She sat quietly for a moment, allowing herself to savor the experience. She had faced a challenge, shared her gift, and left an impression that would endure. The night had begun with a simple dare, yet it had become a defining moment, a story of courage, talent, and authenticity. And in that quiet, reflective moment, she understood that this was only the beginning of what her music could accomplish, and how it could continue to touch hearts in ways she had never imagined.